Hello, hi, welcome. Thank you for joining me today in this endeavor in which I am about to embark. My name is Ellen. I forgot to introduce myself on my previous two videos. Hopefully that added some sort of air of mystery or mystique that the name Ellen doesn't, but that is my name. Welcome to my video where I talk about the first book in the Murderbot Diaries series. I always go to call it the Murderbot series, but it is the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. So I have a little bit of very minor history with this book, which is that I did go to pick it up in 2021 according to the Libby app, and I didn't read it, much like I don't read many things that I borrow. But it intrigued me enough at that point in 2021 that I picked it up. So and that was definitely at a point where I read very little sci-fi. I still wouldn't say that it's one of my dominant genres, but there was just something about this one. I think probably the massive hype. And as you probably know, if you're watching this, a series is just about to come out. And so when I was talking about it with my coworker and we were both kind of raving about Alexander Skarsgård, I said, I would absolutely love to read this, and she ended up getting it for me, which was amazing. So now I have not just the first in the series, but the, I think, 6 that have come out so far. I will correct it on the screen if that's not the right amount in the series, but I'm hoping that what I'll do is I will read all of them and I will do a bit of a recap as I go. So this is obviously the first one. There will be spoilers as I go. I'm sure there are plenty of reviews of this series on the internet that are not spoilery if you'd like to know about the book but not know that in depth. But I thought it would be good to kind of look at the book before I definitely check out the series. So the description for people who haven't checked it out yet. The main character is a deadly security droid that has bucked its restrictive programming and is balanced between contemplative self-discovery and an idle instinct to kill all humans. In a corporate-dominated spacefaring future, planetary missions must be approved and supplied by the company. Exploratory teams are accompanied by company-supplied security androids for their own safety. But in a society where contracts are awarded to the lowest bidder, safety isn't a primary concern. On a distant planet, a team of scientists are conducting surface tests, shadowed by their company-supplied droid, a self-aware sec unit that has hacked its own governor module, and refers to itself, though never out loud, as Murderbot. Scornful of humans, all it really wants is to be left alone long enough to figure out who it is. But when a neighboring mission goes dark, it's up to the scientists and their Murderbot to get to the truth. As I said, my background with science fiction is not huge. It's something that I'm kind of dipping my toe in. I read The Day of the Triffids about 4 years ago, and that definitely switched something on in my brain where I was like, sci-fi is good. For a long time, I think something about it put me off, and I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it's the fandoms. So other things that might be relevant to know, this book came out in 2017, a science fiction adventure novella, and I think it'll be a hoot. It tackles questions of the ethics of sentient robotics, as well as just reading it and doing a bit of a recap and my opinions. And I suppose whether this hooks me in as a non-sci-fi reader, I wanted to talk about whether or not I see Alexander Skarsgård in this role as I go through. A little bit about how people read. And that's obviously quite broad, but specifically in terms of how people see things in their head as they read. And there's obviously quite a difference in how people do this. I see nothing when I read. I know people talk about, I pictured the character different. I would never picture a character differently because I don't really see them in my head. So I am curious going into this if I can just put Alexander Skarsgård in my head as and seeing whether I could imagine him acting these things out and apply that as another layer to this reading, because as I said, I very often don't picture anything as I'm reading, and I think it would be cool to do that. It makes it seem like reading would be a lot more interesting. I'm envious of people who see a whole world in their head. If I'm picturing a scene that continues beyond what we actually see in a book, I'm playing it out with the dialogue and not really seeing a visual element to it. So I am so keen to start. and I will see you once I have read a little bit. Alright, so in this series we are in the head of Murderbot, and Murderbot is basically all of us. It's just trying to squeeze in as much time for media around its actual job, that being working as a security bot or sec unit. Murderbot has hacked its governor module though, so that's what allows it to watch shows and generally have some degree of agency. It still has access to the hub system, which is where it can receive intel and connect with other systems like the medical systems, and is partly made up of organic and non-organic material. So looks kind of human, but has like an armor facade. When we first meet Murderbot, it is working a contract for a team of humans. They don't know that it is a free agent as such, but there is sort of an immediate feeling of Murderbot being at odds with the others. They have expectations of it given that it is a Murderbot and it is generally socially uncomfortable anyway. So it's a bit of a feedback loop of they're uncomfortable because a Murderbot is on board, and it is uncomfortable because it doesn't want to be talking to humans who are uncomfortable. The contract they're on is essentially a survey trip to see if it's worth bidding on the planet's resources. I don't like that vibe, but I suppose that is the capitalistic interplanetary future hellscape we're working with. Immediately we're thrown into a situation where Murderbot has to rescue two of the people in the crew, because while they're surveying the planet, a giant hostile thing bursts through the ground. In the process, the Murderbot takes off its helmet in an effort to kind of comfort the human with its human-looking face. Murderbot is able to subvert the system, which wants it to prioritize other things, to save one of the humans and coordinate through a link with the leader of the team to get an evacuation out of the area. They take the hoppers back to their base of operations, which is called their habitat, and this is kind of set up near the assessment zone. Because it's harmed in the rescue, Murderbot needs to take itself back to its repair cubicle, go offline, and it wraps itself up in a little blanket. As readers, we're also getting updates for what capacity the sec unit is at, as well as the various checks it's doing, kind of multiple different aspects that the sec unit is keeping track of, like the med system and comms and all these sorts of things, and it has access to recordings so that it can see what the other crew are doing as well. The team leader Mensa goes to check in on it and is confronted by kind of the humanness of Murderbot. So Murderbot has needed to take off some of its armor to heal in this cubicle, and it's also clear that the Murderbot is quite injured from doing this kind of rescue scenario. Once it recovers, it checks up on the others and sees that they've been talking about it, particularly given that Murderbot has not opened up its helmet before and has done like an actual good job of comforting the human, something that it probably learnt from watching the TV shows. At this point, the Murderbot is described as having a standard generic human head, which is very much not Alexander Skarsgård. And also not Alexander Skarsgård is that they feel uncomfortable seeing Murderbot without its armor. They are required to have Murderbot on board though, or sec unit. They don't think of it as Murderbot. Murderbot is its own internal name for itself, but they think of it as a sec unit. They're required to have a sec unit on board as part of the kind of package from the company. In general though, the crew are pretty kind, especially to each other. The group's name is Preservation Orcs, and they are a group of scientists and researchers. Murderbot admits that it likes their vibe as they're a fairly low stress group, and it's generally motivated to keep them safe, even though its governor module is no longer enforcing that. There are 8 people in the crew, and I genuinely don't remember all of them. As I was going through the book, I was just like, there are a whole bunch of people that I'm like, yep, and vague crew member. So I will do just like a little rundown with some visual cues, and then maybe when they come up later, you'll remember who they are. So Mena is the team leader, very level-headed and cares about her team. Murderbot notes multiple times how much it respects her and her judgment. She's just very cool, very level-headed, a good leader. Valescu is another part of the team, a scientist doing the fieldwork stuff, and the one who needs to be rescued after the attack as he was badly shaken. So that's the person who Murderbot specifically shows its face to. Also in the incident is Barajwaj, who is another field scientist. She needs medical assistance and is taken to the infirmary, so Murderbot also helps her. Garathan is distinct in that he is an augmented human. so has access to more of the feeds and the systems like Murderbot does, but not on the same level. I think the actor that they've picked for the role is impeccable casting. I've seen him in something else, I can't remember what it is, but I feel like he's really going to suit the character, who is just a bit more solitary than the others, but still gets along with the rest of the group. Arada and Overse, or Oversi, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Arada and Overse are two other scientists slash specialists. They're marital partners, but it's not really relevant. So far, they don't do much. Rathi and Pinley similarly are other members of the team that will come up, but Pinley specifically is the one that points out that the report that they've been given on the planet must have been altered. Murderbot takes a look and confirms that there is altered or redacted content in the report, specifically concerning the fauna, given that they didn't know that there was a big underground hostile that could come up and attack them while they were surveying. Murderbot admits the hub system may have been hacked, but it's more likely that the report was damaged before they received the survey bid. They discover a discrepancy in the map too, and so they decide to investigate. It's at this point it's really clear that Murderbot is quite an awkward fella, and so I immediately looked up Murderbot and autism, and it turns out that the series is quite popular among autistic communities, and the author is neurodivergent, so I feel like I called that amazingly. As well, at this point, I realised that I'd been misgendering or gendering Murderbot, but canonically, Murderbot has no gender, even though it will be played by Alexander Skarsgård. So if I slip up there, it's because I'm thinking of our dear friend Alex. Mensa suggests that Murderbot stays with the crew and it basically nopes out of there. Again, somewhat calling attention to itself and the fact that it's not like a government standard sec unit. There is something about it that is able to kind of shuck the innate instincts and makes it kind of just a little bit more awkward, and that is a little bit part of the hacking of the governor module. It means, I guess, just able to express itself and able to feel things, essentially. But the team are definitely extending the offer to Murderbot to kind of join them a little bit. Murderbot can see through the feeds that the crew have been talking about it and becomes aware that the humans are kind of starting to empathize a bit more with it. They've had no prior experience with sec units before though, so they don't immediately understand that it is acting in a different way. At this point there's a line that's like, yes, talk to the Murderbot about its feelings. The idea was so painful I dropped to 97% efficiency. So they head off to the hoppers to investigate the area that kind of lines up with the missing map section. They need to be fairly cautious because the scanners aren't working great and they've already encountered one big hostile. They land and take samples though, with Murderbot steering them in the right direction since the maps on their feeds aren't picking up the hazardous areas. So there's more glitches, but they're alright. They head back to the hoppers. Murderbot is able to interfere with the hub system automatic updates as it receives the package, but plans to upgrade later. At this point, I'm like, this upgrade is going to come into play, and the fact that the Murderbot has the ability to not immediately take on upgrades from the system is going to be key. They discover at that point that they also can't contact Deltful Group, who are the other expedition group on the planet. They suspect that their habitat has been damaged, and because of that they might be in danger or dead. It's suspicious, particularly given the corrupted survey package that they've received. Internally, Murderbot keeps reiterating how cheap the company is, and so some of the issues with comms or packs could be the fault of capitalism, essentially. If there had been an emergency though, the beacon may not have triggered, so they basically split up for a rescue mission / investigation. And Murderbot is able to convince them to have it go as well. To its chagrin, it is encouraged to be in the cabin area with everyone else rather than the cargo pod. And during the trip, Rathi tries to have a conversation about Murderbot's feelings, and it does not enjoy it. It's aware that its actions are not what a governor module controlled robot would do, but it just sort of faces the wall to get away from the conversation, and boy if that isn't tempting sometimes. Also during the trip, the satellite allowing them to access the hub system goes down, so they can rely on the feed and comms from the hoppers, but they are too far away from the habitat to connect to that anymore. They decide to press on though, but Murderbot obviously, wisely, gets quite a bad feeling at this point. At the habitat of Deltful, they observe no obvious damage on the outside, Murderbot, again, getting quite a bad vibe, doesn't want these humans harmed, particularly given it says it has a bad track record. Murderbot is pretty convinced it is the 3 sec units that it picked up in the system specs as belonging to this team that could be the danger and playing into whatever has happened here. Murderbot also has a series of drones, which I like to think of as its little pets, that are scoping out the scene from above. So Murderbot takes the lead in investigating inside the habitat and discovers the dead bodies of the crew. Also among them is a sec unit who has been destroyed by, I think, some sort of drill, which would require close range and is the sort of murder weapon that could be presented as non-nefarious until they were right up close to the sec unit. Murderbot then encounters the 2 units and attacks, including using its cool arm gun ports, and fights them off, during which it experiences a system failure. So it gets attacked and it shuts down. When it comes back online, it's on a table with something being stabbed into its neck. It takes down the sec unit that is holding it, and Mensa swoops in to take down the other, which is great because Murderbot is in not great condition and now it's had something in its head. So with Overse and Rathi, they manage to help get the Murderbot back into the cabin. Realizing then that the sec unit must have inserted a combat override module in Murderbot, it encourages the crew to shut it down. It struggles with the language, knowing that the humans aren't going to be able to take that very well, and if they're told to actually kill it, and they don't really go along with it. So it makes the decision for them, grabbing a nearby gun and triggering a shutdown. This effectively freezes the download, and Pinley and Overse manage to remove the combat module, thankfully. It also overhears the conversation the crew are having where Gerathan reveals to the others that he dug into the feed with the offline to explore anomalies and discovered Murderbot's rogue status. So the others don't believe this, or at least Valescu explains that the governor module is hacked. That's what it looks like, but the sec unit has been continuing to operate in their best interests, so it can be trusted. Gerathan argues that it could be more sabotage, which I think is fair. Gerathan is presented as a little bit of an antagonist, but not like enough that I think is unrealistic for the rest of the team to like him. But Murderbot interrupts to let them know the company does not want them dead. At that point, Gerathan also reveals its backstory. So Murderbot previously worked for a team where 57 people ended up dead when its module malfunctioned. It explains that that's not why it hacked it. It didn't do that so that it could kill a bunch of people, but did so only after the event, after it was given a new governor module, so that this sort of thing wouldn't happen again. Internally, it acknowledges that that's what it thinks happens. I think there's still room for other books to explore maybe whether or not that's actually what happened, but maybe that is the answer. It's just it hacked it so that that wouldn't happen again. Its secret name, Murderbot, is also revealed to the rest of the team, as well as its dedication to consuming many, many hours of soap operas. Gerathan remains unconvinced of the lack of threat, but the others are pretty okay with Murderbot, particularly Mensa, who recognises it's a useful ally in this rather unfriendly environment. Hilariously, Arata attempts to comfort the Murderbot after its experience in the other habitat, and it responds to this attention by just walking into a corner. It vocalizes all of the sabotages so far, and the team decide to inspect Murderbot's delivered but not enacted upgrade and to shut down the hub system. It's not the company that's doing it, but it's suggested that they took a bribe to conceal a third-party survey group, not knowing that their intent was to kill the other survey groups. This means that the pickup transport should still be arriving as planned. It turns out that through this upgrade, hacking the bot would have also given this unknown entity access to their med system and sec system too. So this secret expedition team are dubbed Evil Survey, and the doubtful group lightly let them in, thinking that they were preservation orcs. Having gained access to their comm would kind of allow them to pretend to be them. They decide then that they need to abandon their habitat, given that Evil Survey know exactly where they are. They do this with the crew still kind of struggling with their feelings about the sec unit, and Murderbot also feeling awkward about it. Abandoning the habitat also means leaving the repair cubicle when the Murderbot's fighting strategy is largely to throw itself at the danger, so there is some risk in doing this as well, but they have to make a hasty exit in the choppers when the systems are targeted. Through one of their drones, they find out that unfortunately their emergency beacon is busted. They debate what to do, and Mensa requests that Murderbot stay unhelmeted while they navigate it, since that'll help the others adjust to Murderbot being kind of one of them. It makes Murderbot feel uncomfortable, but agrees with what she says, because she says that it'll make them feel as if it is a person who is trying to help, which is how she thinks of it, which is so sweet. During their conversation, Murderbot reveals that it hasn't dug into the files enough to work out who Preservation Orc's team are actually affiliated with. It only skimmed the survey documents because it didn't care. It's revealed that Mensa is the political entity in charge of this mission, the director of the steering committee of the Preservation Alliance, which is quite a mouthful. This could work in their favour. Like, it's a bargaining chip that if Mensa was killed, there would be more of an investigation. Rathi explains that bots on preservation are considered as full citizens, but internally Murderbot questions this, as they still have to have a human or part human guardian. So even in other parts of the world where they are recognised in some places, but also kind of. Separately, Garathan asks if it was punished for what it did to the other crew. It was effectively wiped as a result. Then asks if it blames the humans for purging its memory of the initial event. Murderbot says no, it doesn't have the same feelings about that a human would. Murderbot also tries to zone out with cereals, but can't because the reality of the situation is too much. Again, relatable Murderbot. One of the drones catches sight of a hopper, and it turns out that Evil Survey are actually a team called Grey Chris, and they're loaded up with 5 SEC units. They've also left a message by hacking one of the scouting drones. They admit to destroying the beacon and invite the team to meet at these particular coordinates to negotiate terms. They're not particularly hopeful that they are actually meaning this, that they're not planning to just kill them, so Murderbot comes up with a plan. Mena and Murderbot fly out to the rendezvous point the next day. Murderbot leaves her in the chopper and then walks up to the Grey Chris team. They're confused because a SEC unit is speaking to them like a person would, and Murderbot admits to hacking its own governor module. It also suggests exchanging the crew for its own freedom. It's a ploy, obviously, but it gets them to start up the team's hub system so that they can check the records. Since Murderbot has suggested the beacon will be launched, Grey Chris need to hurry, and they want to take Mensa as collateral. Walking into the trees then with one of their SEC unit guards, Murderbot manages to overtake it, assuming the intent was for this SEC unit to kill Murderbot. Mensa agrees to act as a prisoner while Murderbot swaps the armor with the other unit to act as a disguise. Mensa is taken into the other hopper while Murderbot rides in its cargo container of the enemy hopper. It has a moment of reflecting that, finally, I'm in cargo, but also it's not my cargo container. Murderbot is able to infiltrate the system and check on Mensa as they ride. They land, and as they exit, Murderbot realizes that they are way too close to the beacon they plan to activate. Essentially, its plan was to get access to the system to activate their own emergency beacon, with the crew kind of working on this in the background. Beacons are usually further out from the habitat for the reason that they will certainly explode a whole bunch. So they now kind of found themselves in the danger zone. Realizing how things will turn out, Murderbot rushes to grab Mensa. It takes quite a few hits, but it's also able to shoot some of the other SEC units and bolt away as the beacon begins to ignite. There is an explosion. Murderbot cradles Mensa's head and tries to protect her from the explosion, and then drops offline. It's back again briefly, and then off again, and then when it gets back on, there's an automated message that says that the unit, Murderbot, is at minimal functionality and that it must be discarded. Mensa, who has met up with Garathan and Pinley, forcefully reject this idea, thankfully, and so Murderbot is carried up in a big hopper with the rest of the team. So the plan works, but Murderbot is severely injured. When Murderbot is back online, it finds that it is being repaired at a system facility, but the governor module is still intact. And then when it gets out, it's revealed that Mensa has permanently bought its contract. In the last few pages of the book, Murderbot sort of goes through the motions of learning about Mensa, her home at preservation, and what it would mean to live autonomously in preservation and on a farm. It isn't sure what it would do with its time if it's not being shot at. It watches the entertainment feed to calm down, as do we all. But ultimately, Murderbot decides it wants to be able to make its own calls and breaks off from the group. It disguises itself as a cargo transport bot and slips away on a cargo ship. convincing the ship, who it's obviously able to communicate with, that it's worth letting it on board because of the hours of media it has stored for the journey. And so that is it. The message that was the story was to Mensa, and in the last kind of little bit, she's described as the Murderbot's favorite human, and oh my god, I cried. Oh, I feel like I'm gonna cry now. Yeah, I was surprised by how sentimental this story was and how sweet it was at times. And yeah, I mean, it just felt like it felt so positive in a way. And I think, like, I read a little bit that said originally this was going to be a short story with a very sad ending, and I'm happy that it became this novella with quite a sweet message. The people were very kind. They were always trying to include Murderbot, and it's just so sweet. Yeah, so the writing style and language of this book, it kind of screams 2010s, but it also is a little bit rom-com, or at least that's sort of where I'm familiar with this sort of language. It was fun. It was really accessible, particularly for sci-fi, where I think you can have, like, you heard all the terms I said, systems, preservation. It's all these different terms and everything coming at you. And I think this one did an incredible job. And it managed to tell a wonderful line of very characterful, like, contemporary writing, but inside the mind and point of view of a cyborg. Like, I think that's incredibly well done. Do I think that this is Alexander Skarsgård? I think that in the moments of action, definitely. And then I think about all the times in, like, True Blood where he was playing just a silly, goofy dude. Just like, I can't remember if it was like drunk or affected by like fairy dust or something. I know that there was points where he was like behaving like a silly, goofy dude. And I think that I can actually see Alexander Skarsgård in this role. I think it's a really fun role for him. And I'm also like absolutely keen to read the rest of them. I think I will. I think I'll do reviews of all of them if people are interested. And yeah, I am going to go watch Murderbot in, well, a couple of days now. But by the time I put this up, I will be able to see it. And I'm so excited. So thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe, watch my other videos, and I will hopefully see you next time. Bye.